Superman changed everything for me. Walking out of that theater last summer, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Genuine excitement about the future of DC. So when Supergirl landed on my radar, I was all in. And here's where I land after my first viewing of Supergirl. It is a good movie. Millie Alcock is outstanding. The emotional core is real. There are moments in this film that genuinely are moving. But good isn't great. And after Superman, great is the standard. I'm going to say this to you very plainly. Supergirl does not trust its own hero. The Tom King comic that this is based on, Woman of Tomorrow, trusted her completely. Just Kara, Ruthie, and the vastness of space. The movie keeps flinching. It brings in Lobo, it brings in Superman, it reaches for external energy when the story it already had is enough. And that one decision, that lack of conviction in Kara, is what keeps this film from soaring. So let's start off with what works, what this film got right, because there genuinely is a lot to like in this movie. Like I said, Millie Alcock, she is definitely the real deal. She brings a rawness to Kara that we've never seen before in live action. This isn't the sunny, optimistic girl of steel that pop culture has reduced Supergirl to for decades. This is a young woman carrying the weight of an entire dead civilization on her shoulders, still figuring out who she is and what she's supposed to do with all of that grief. Alcock plays every layer of that, the anger, the humor, the vulnerability, and she does it without ever tipping into self-pity. She is the best thing in this movie by a significant margin. The emotional architecture around her works too. Kara's backstory, the glimpses of Krypton, the depression that has quietly shaped her into who she is, all of that actually lands with a real feeling. This is a Supergirl who actually earned her damage, and seeing that translated onto a screen this big with this much care genuinely matters. The world design deserves credit too. When this film commits to its alien settings, and I will say it's visually impressive. We've got strange creatures, bizarre worlds. There's a real sense that we are nowhere near Earth. Now, me personally, my two favorite parts of this movie, Jason Momoa's Lobo, an absolute blast every second he's on the screen. He is chaotic, unpredictable, genuinely funny, and Momoa is clearly having the time of his life. And then there's Seth Rogen, who shows up as a small alien running a space bus, and he steals every scene that he's in. I laughed out loud more than once. His lines land, and he's a pure shot of fun in a movie that badly needs it. Now for the hard part. What didn't work in this movie? Krem of the Yellow Hills is the film's biggest failure. And I don't say that lightly, because all great heroes are ultimately defined by the villains they face. Kara deserved a villain that matched her emotional intensity. What we got instead is a character who never once feels threatening, never once feels unpredictable, and never gives Alcock anything truly dangerous to play against. His look didn't work for me, his presence didn't intimidate, and in a story where the villain's cruelty is supposed to be the engine that drives everything forward, I think that is the fatal flaw of this film. The middle act of the movie also drags. There's a stretch in the second act where the film loses momentum almost completely. The Ruth and Kara relationship, which should be the emotional spine of this entire story, feels truncated. Things happen quickly. You don't get to breathe. You don't get to sit with these two characters long enough to get the full weight of what they mean to each other. The comic earned that relationship across 8 issues. I think the film rushes it. And then there's the world-building consistency problem that kept pulling me out of the story. For a film set entirely in deep space among alien civilizations, there's a surprising number of moments where Earth logic, Earth references, and Earth humor bleed through in ways that don't quite make sense. There's a scene where Kara speaks in an alien language that's pure screaming. That is one of the best moments of the film, by the way. But it commits to that idea where we are nowhere near home, and then that commitment evaporates. Alien characters seem to understand Earth slang, Earth cultural references land in rooms where they shouldn't. It's as if different parts of the script were written by people operating with different assumptions about what kind of universe this actually is. It's a small thing in isolation, but it adds up, and it points to a larger problem. Now, here's the part where I'm going to struggle most, because it's almost unfair to director Craig Gillespie to say this, but look, he's a competent director. He gets the job done. But if I'm being completely honest, nothing he's made has ever fully resonated with me personally, and Supergirl didn't change that. You can feel James Gunn's absence in every scene that doesn't quite land here, where Superman and Creature Commandos kind of set up this new DC universe, and even to a certain extent, the Suicide Squad. You miss that James Gunn-ness to it. there's the heart and the humor of a James Gunn movie and project that are just sorely lacking here. What Gunn does better than almost anyone working in this space right now is hold on to that humor and heart in the same hand simultaneously. Not humor, then heart, not heart interrupted by humor, both at the same time. So seamlessly that you don't even notice until you're laughing and crying in the same breath. Superman had that. Guardians had it. It's the same thing that makes this film feel alive in a way that's almost impossible to manufacture. Supergirl has traces of this, moments where you can see it reaching for that frequency, but it never quite gets there. The humor lands separately from the emotion. The heart shows up separately from the fun. And what you're left with is a film that has all these ingredients of a Gunn DC entry without the thing that makes those ingredients sing, makes them cook. And it's really frustrating because people are calling this a Guardians clone. I mean, way back, even from the first trailer back in December, you had the rock soundtrack, the space pirates, the dirty lived-in cosmic aesthetic, and people were like, is this just James Gunn doing James Gunn again, just one universe over? Instead of Marvel, it's DC. But the answer is really more complicated than that. It's not Gunn doing Gunn, it's someone else trying to do Gunn and then landing in this uncanny valley between imitation and inspiration. Close enough to feel familiar, but not close enough to feel alive. I think it was on the page, it just didn't make it to the screen. And I didn't go into my first showing. I actually going to watch it again tomorrow as I'm recording this, but I didn't really go in much knowing about the production troubles, but I've researched it since then, and I really kind of did a deep dive into insider reports and test screenings, and I found that there were a lot of production troubles on this movie, and I think I felt it as I was watching the film. There's a word for what Supergirl feels like in its weakest moments: patchwork. Like different versions of the same movie competing for space in the final cut. There's these tonal shifts that don't feel intentional, scenes that feel like they belong to a different film entirely, a middle act that sags in ways that suggest that material was added, removed, or rearranged more than once. It kind of reminded me of the Ezra Miller Flash movie, a film that had a genuinely compelling core buried under the evidence of too many cooks, too many test screenings, too many competing visions of what the final product should be. Supergirl isn't nearly as chaotic as that film, but that same patchwork feeling is there if you're paying attention. And then our boy Superman shows up, and suddenly the room lights up, which tells you everything. When your most crowd-pleasing moment belongs to a character from a different movie, that's not a cameo, that's a lifeline. And lifelines don't get thrown to films that trust themselves. Now, I mentioned the Tom King comic book earlier, Woman of Tomorrow, because you really can't fully understand what this film is without knowing that backstory. Woman of Tomorrow is 8 issues, and in those 8 issues, Tom King and Bilquis Evely, who had a shout out in the movie, there's a planet named after her, and I saw her at the world premiere red carpet. That was cool. But they do something in that comic that is genuinely rare. They strip Kara down to her rawest self, and they ask the question that nobody had really asked before. Not what can Supergirl do, but who is Supergirl when nobody needs saving? Who is she when she's lost, when she's angry, when she's celebrating a birthday alone in deep space because Earth never quite felt like home? The answer is one of the most compelling character studies in recent comic history, and the engine that drives it is simple. Just Kara, just Ruth. Just the road ahead of them and the villain they're chasing. I really felt like it was like True Grit in space. No reinforcements, no safety net. Just two people from shattered worlds finding something in each other that neither of them expected. The film keeps that skeleton. You could feel that. The emotional DNA is there, and credit where it's due. Some of it genuinely does translate through in the movie, but then it adds Lobo. Then it adds Superman. Then it rushes the Ruth relationship to make room for everything else. And in doing so, it answers a question the comic never really felt the need to ask. What if Kara needed help? And I want to go back to that Guardians comparison that I think a lot of people had when they saw that first trailer back in December. It was never really about the space pirates or the rock soundtrack. Those elements come directly from the comic. The reason the film feels like Guardians isn't the source material. It's that the film keeps reaching for that same Gunn safety net, the ensemble energy, the crowd-pleasing cameos, the external support system. Instead of trusting the singular vision at its center, the comic didn't need Lobo. It didn't need Superman, and neither did this movie. Now, Lobo was in like the rough drafts, and I saw that King cut him out, but I think he made the right choice in the comic. Somewhere in those countless test screenings, someone decided that Lobo was necessary, I think. The comic's entire power comes from the fact that she doesn't need saving. She is enough. Kara alone, at her most broken, is enough to carry a story. The film didn't believe that, and I think that's the adaptation's original sin. Now, something I want to draw your attention to. My favorite two things in the movie, like I said, were Lobo and Seth Rogen's space bus alien. Neither of them is in the comic. The most enjoyable parts of the Supergirl movie were the parts that have nothing to do with the actual Woman of Tomorrow story. Now, that's not a knock on Momoa or Rogen. Those two are great, like I said. But it's the whole problem in miniature. When the reinforcements are more fun than the mission, something has gone wrong at the foundation. And I do want to address the box office numbers right now because I think context matters. Superman last year opened to $125 million domestically. That was a statement. It said that the DCU was back, that Gunn's vision was connecting, that audiences were ready to believe again. It was exactly the foundation that this new universe needed. Supergirl, right now, as of this recording, is tracking somewhere between 30 to $50 million this weekend, and that number has been sliding for weeks. It opened on the tracking charts at 55 million. Now the optimistic trade estimates, as I was doing my research before this, have walked it down, and some prognosticators are floating numbers as low as the high 30s. That is a real chance that it doesn't even win its opening weekend. It's going up against Toy Story 5 in its second weekend, which is tracking around 140 million. So I don't know about that. Kara's in for some rough sailing ahead there. But here's the comparison that I think should make DC nervous. That $55 million opening that it was originally chasing, that's almost exactly where the Ezra Miller Flash movie opened back in 2023 before it collapsed and became one of the most infamous box office disasters in modern superhero history. I already compared this film to Flash earlier in my thoughts here, but I think that same patchwork, too many cooks, feeling in the final cut. Now the box office is rhyming too. It's like poetry. They rhyme. That's not a coincidence that I love pointing to, but it is there. Now, box office tracking doesn't equal destiny. Word of mouth can move numbers. A great film can outperform its projections. But I really think that this should be concerning for the studios, DC and Warner Brothers. There are reportedly more than 80 companies behind this movie, a promotional push worth somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 million. And tracking still went down. When a marketing campaign that massive can't move the needle, the problem isn't awareness. People know this movie exists. They're just not convinced they need to see it on the big screen. And that's really the whole thing in a nutshell, isn't it? The lack of conviction I felt watching the film, the sense that even the movie didn't fully believe in its own hero. The audience is feeling that too, from the outside before they've even bought a ticket. Compare that to Spider-Man Brand New Day, which is breaking box office pre-orders and pre-sales left and right. The Tom King comic has a passionate fan base. Millie Alcock is genuinely magnetic. The premise, a broken Kryptonian, a grieving child, a road trip across the cosmos, is exactly the kind of intimate epic that should translate into something special. Instead, what we have is a film that the market isn't sure what to do with. Too dark for casual audiences, not faithful enough for comic readers, not quite Gunn enough for the fans that Superman converted last summer. Now, don't get it twisted. The DCU is not in crisis, but Supergirl needs to be proof that Superman wasn't a fluke. Right now, it feels more like a stumble than a stride. Now, like I said before, Supergirl is not a bad movie. I don't want you leaving this review thinking I thought it was terrible. I want to be clear about that. There are moments in this film that are genuinely great. Millie Alcock delivers a performance that this character has deserved for decades. The emotional foundation is real. The ambition is there. And I like where it leaves Kara in the end. The setup for what comes next gives me genuine hope that the best of this character is still ahead of us. And Man of Tomorrow next summer, I think, is going to do fantastic. But hope for the future isn't the same as satisfaction right now. I walked into the movie wanting to love it. I walked out respecting it. And in the summer, where the DCU needed another win, respecting it isn't quite enough. I did bring a friend to my screening that I went to, and this is someone with zero comic book background, no investment in the source material, no idea what a Tom King even is. And he walked out talking about his daughter, about how important it is for little girls to have heroes like this, not princess heroes, heroes who fight, heroes who struggle, heroes who are messy and complicated and real. And I agree with that 100%. Whatever this film's flaws, Millie Alcock's Kara Zor-El is going to matter to a lot of young girls out there who've never heard of Woman of Tomorrow. That is not nothing. That's actually everything. And it makes the film's lack of conviction in its own hero even more frustrating. Because if a general audience dad can walk out of a middling cut of this movie and immediately understand why Kara matters, imagine what a great version of this film could have done. The Tom King comic trusted Kara completely. It put her alone in the vastness of space with a grieving child and a dying dog and said, she is enough. This story is enough. We don't need anything else. The film blinks, it brings in reinforcements, it hedges its bets, and in doing so it answered a question that should have never been asked in the first place. Is Supergirl enough to carry her own movie? Millie Alcock's performance says yes, empathetically, beautifully, undeniably yes. The film around her isn't so sure. And that gap between what Alcock delivers and what the movie is willing to believe about its own hero is exactly the distance between a good DCU film and a great one. Superman made me believe the DCU was something special. Supergirl made me realize that lightning doesn't just strike twice. You have to trust the person holding the rod. But let me know your thoughts if you have seen Supergirl, or maybe if you're not interested, if you want to see more from Superman next summer and Man of Tomorrow. I'm genuinely curious. I want to hear all of your thoughts down below in the comments. Stay tuned for more superhero talk here on This Comic Cooks. I am Vactor, and thank you for joining me.